years ago, I sat down to review a performance dashboard I was really proud of. Every number was up, traffic was up, followers were up, email opens were up, media mentions were up, click-through rates were up. There were little green arrows next to everything. And if you've ever built one of these, you know exactly how good that wall of green feels. It looks like winning. Then someone asked the question that deflated the entire room. Okay, but did any of this move the business? And I just sat there. Truth be told, I was trying not to cry, but from an outside perspective, I just sat there because the dashboard didn't have that line. It had 12 metrics that were technically accurate, but none could answer the only question that actually mattered. The numbers were not lying exactly. They were just measuring things that were flattering instead of informing. And that is the trap. We confuse accuracy with relevance. A metric can be 100% correct and 100% beside the point at the same time. If you've been following along, you know where this fits. Last week in the PESO Model Operating System series, I argued that a measurement problem is almost never a measurement problem. You can't gauge a system that isn't running as a system. On this week's FinSucks podcast episode, you'll finally get the payoff on measurement. I'm going to give you the metrics that survive contact with your CFO.
If you're a communications pro who works hard, doesn't compromise quality, and gets the job done, welcome home. We'll share our tips, tricks, and stories, and together we will change the face of PR. Spin sucks, but we don't. With the Spin Sucks podcast, here's Gini Dietrich.
Welcome back to the FinSucks podcast. I'm Gini Dietrich. Before we get started, I have a little tidbit for you. Did you know that if you can't finish watching right now, you can subscribe to the audio version of this show? We're on all the platforms where you get your podcasts, including Spotify and Apple, or you can subscribe to our newsletter at spinsucks.com and get it personally from me in your inbox every Tuesday morning. Most of the numbers we report up the chain were designed for a world that no longer exists. Impressions assumed a human would see your thing. Reach assumed distribution was the hard part. AVEs, advertising value equivalents, assumed a clip in a newspaper was worth whatever an ad would have cost in that same space. Ugh. These were all nonsense numbers at the times that they were launched, but they're even more so now. Expecting billions of impressions when there are only 8 billion people in the world is not only ludicrous, I think it's malpractice. And yet, people want billions of impressions. None of this is evil. They're just answering questions that nobody important, the people who sign the checks and decide on the budget, is asking anymore. The questions have changed. Your buyer doesn't start with a search bar and 10 blue links anymore. They ask ChatGPT, they ask Gemini, they ask Perplexity, they ask Claude, and they get a single synthesized answer. We covered exactly this shift in the visibility gap earlier in the series. If you measured your visibility by where you ranked on a results page, you've been counting parking spaces in a building that everyone left. So now we need new instruments, not because the old ones are broken, but because the building has changed. Everyone's moved to the cool new space now. There are 4 metrics you're going to track: LLM visibility, citation frequency, narrative share of voice, and credibility loop close rate. And while we're doing this, do you like the color of my fingernails? I'm very excited about them. Anyway, all right, so let's talk about LLM visibility. When you think about that, it helps you answer when someone asks an AI a question your business should own. Do you show up in the answer? This is the new top of the funnel, and it's the one that most communicators haven't even started tracking. It's not where do I rank on Google anymore. It's when a buyer asks the machine that now stands between them and every decision, am I in the response or is my competitor? You can measure that in one of 2 ways, either the boring, rigorous, but free way, or by using a tool like Brandy, B-R-A-N-D-I, that will not only track your visibility week over week, but also give you recommendations and tell you which content to optimize. If you're going to do the former, you'll build a list of the 20 or 30 questions your ideal buyer asks, run them across the major models on a regular cadence, and log whether you appear, how you're described, and whether the description is even right. Spoiler alert, sometimes it's confidently gloriously wrong. It hallucinates, it makes things up, and that's its own informative data. If the machine answering your buyer's question doesn't know you exist, every downstream metric, every lead, every conversion, every dollar is measured on a foundation that isn't even there. That is what you have to fix first. Next is citation frequency, which will help you understand how often your organization is cited by the source, by AI, by journalists, and by other creators. This is the metric that replaces the clip count, the impressions, the AVEs, and the mentions. The distinction between the two is that a mention says you appeared, and maybe someone saw it, and a citation says you are the reference. In an AI-mediated world, citation frequency is the closest thing we have to measuring authority. When a model attributes a claim to you, when a reporter calls you the expert instead of just quoting you, when another creator builds on your ideas, that is the signal that you're not just visible, you're load-bearing. Track it. Who's citing you, for what claims, how often, and whether that frequency is climbing. A rising citation frequency is the earliest leading indicator that your authority, reputation, and trust are building in ways that positively affect the organization. Then you'll take a look at the narrative share of voice, which tells you among all the conversations in your category, how much is happening on your terms. Old share of voice counted volume. It counted how many mentions you got versus how many your competitors got. In that game, the loudest voice always won. Narrative share of voice, however, counts something more challenging but far more valuable. It counts who's framing, whose language, and whose questions the whole category has adopted. It's the difference between being mentioned a lot and being the lens that everyone else is forced to look through. This is how you know you're winning. Insert Charlie Sheen jumping on a chair. When your competitors start using your words to describe the problem, when the analyst report uses your framing, when the prospect repeats your category definition back to you in the first meeting, when an agency goes to pitch a piece of business and uses your copyrighted IP, not to know that I know anything about that, you have narrative share of voice. You didn't just join the conversation, you defined the conversation. You're setting the terms. This is the one that's hardest to fake, and it's hardest for a competitor to buy their way out of. You can buy volume. You cannot buy narrative. You have to earn it. Okay, so lastly, we have the credibility loop close rate. This means that when someone encounters you, how reliably do they complete the loop from visibility to trust to actually taking action? So they saw you, now they trust you, and now they're buying something, right? This is the one that survives the budget meeting because it demonstrates one of the four things that organizations care most about: revenue, reputation, recruiting, or risk. I love that alliteration. This is the one that makes the CFO put down the pen because it's the only metric of the four that connects the whole chain in a single line. Visibility gets you seen, citation makes you credible, narrative makes you the default, but the credibility loop close rate asks, and then what? Of the people who entered the system, how many came out the other side trusting you enough to act? You build it by actually tracking the path. Someone discovers you in an AI answer, they consume an owned piece that it cited, they see you show up again in earned, and they eventually raise their hand to say, yeah, I'm going to buy what you have. The close rate is how often that full journey completes versus how often it stalls. It's leads, but with memory. It's pipeline, but with attribution to the system that produced it. And this is one of our biggest challenges in general, right? Now you have attribution to the system that produced it. When your CFO asked the question that deflated my room at the start of this episode, did this move the business? This is the line that answers. I no longer have to sit there and fight back tears. Finally. I can already feel some of you thinking, great, more new metrics. I don't have time for any of this. I don't have time for the data that I do have. I don't understand the data that I do have. I'm already at capacity. Nope, 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 no buts. This is not negotiable. This is must have, absolutely, positively must have. And I mentioned Brandy earlier. It is a game changer. Spend the money if you have it because it will help you do all of these things in one pretty dashboard and you don't have to do the manual work yourself. You can do the manual work yourself, but you won't have to. So no ifs or ands or buts about this because our PESO Model Diagnostic, where we're collecting information about how people are running their PESO model programs, that data is telling me that measurement is the biggest challenge everyone has, measurement and integration. And this is why this episode exists. We've now assessed more than 100 organizations. And when I run the numbers, two dimensions correlate with overall PESO maturity more tightly than any of the others: integration and measurement. Integration came in at 0.83 correlation and measurement at 0.68. Not even 1%. Or not even, yeah, not good. Okay. These are the two. Is this actually a system or just a pile of tactics signals? And they predict maturity better than how good your owned content is, better than how much earned you land, better than any single channel that you can run, which would be lovely news, except for the second number. Only 7% of the organizations we have assessed have reached the systemized stage toward the end of the PESO model maturity ladder. 56% are still parked at foundation or pilot, which is the bottom. And measurement is one of the lowest scoring dimensions across the board. It roughly quadruples as organizations climb the PESO model maturity ladder from 19 at foundation to 77 at synthesize. So if you can get this right, your PESO model maturity is significantly better. You have to get measurement right, not just to climb the PESO model maturity ladder, which of course I would love for you to do, but to be taken seriously by the people who assign the budgets and sign the checks. If you read the integration and measurement findings together, you'll realize that the metrics that most separate the mature from the stuck are exactly the ones almost nobody is tracking yet. And that, my friends, is your opportunity. The reason you cannot ignore this is the same reason my old dashboard lied to me and made me sit in that meeting speechless. These 4 metrics are outputs of a system. They're not inputs you can manufacture in isolation. LLM visibility comes from owned content that is structured to be cited, distributed through earned that builds authority, reinforced through shared that signals relevance, and amplified through paid to ensure the right audiences see it first. Citation frequency rises when all 4 PESO channels point at the same thesis, that consistency. Narrative share of voice only exists if you've been saying a consistent, ownable thing long enough for the category to absorb it. You cannot measure a system that isn't running as a system. Try, and you'll get my dashboard at the beginning of this. 12 accurate numbers with pretty green arrows pointing up, but 0 answers. 0 real measurement, 0 real conversations, because you simply cannot attribute your work to business outcomes. The metrics I described in this episode are not a measurement project. They're a maturity project wearing a measurement costume. If your channels are coordinated but not integrated, if everyone's busy but nothing compounds, these numbers will stay flat no matter how nicely you chart them, no matter how many green arrows you have. And that is the hard truth and the hopeful one at the same time. Hard because you can't shortcut it. Hopeful because almost no one else has done it either. 7%, remember? So you're in good company. Almost no one else has done this yet. You can get a leg up. The room is wide open and the opportunity is yours to take. If you'd like to chat about metrics and how to get what you need out of your data, join us in the SpinSucks community. It's a great place to get advice, brainstorm ideas, and build real relationships with your peers. You can find us at spinsucks.com/community. That's spinsucks.com/community. And make sure you follow us on LinkedIn, TikTok, and Instagram. We're posting tips, how-tos, cheat sheets, shit Chinny says, and more every week. I'll see you next week. Bye.